The first COVID-19 case recorded in Papua New Guinea was in Orere province on March 20 this year. The government imposed a lockdown as a result, affecting supply chains in the business arena and restricting movement of people and public transport heavily. Church worship services were cancelled, schools shut down, and information sharing about COVID-19 through the internet and other channels of communication flooded the airwaves. With the state of emergency finally getting lifted, Parliament passed the bill to have the National Pandemic Act 2020 in place. The new act came as a relief for many people, but eventually many questioned its legality as well as its relevance and practicality. Papua New Guinea did not record a single positive COVID-19 case for weeks, and the total number of confirmed cases remained a single digit, easing the challenging experiences that citizens had gone through. And just when everything seemed calm and under control, authorities announced 3 new cases in NCD, marking the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in PNG. A surge in the number of positive cases and 2 deaths occurring eventually forced authorities to take NCD back into lockdown.
The National Capital District and Port Moresby will be shut down for a 14-day period with a state of emergency as declared under Pandemic Act, with only essential business to operate. And the controller will define what are those essential businesses. Curfew will be in place from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. every day for the next 14 days. Wearing of masks will become mandatory in public places. And I've asked my 4 colleague members of parliament in the city to use a facility that national government has made available to every member of parliament. We've made available 1.5 million aid to assist SMEs and to assist businesses.
This formed what some people call a new twist to the pandemic in Papua New Guinea. Overseas, clinical trials continue as scientists work around the clock to develop a vaccine. Papua New Guinea joins the rest of the world to suppress transmission of the deadly virus. As efforts to contain the virus continue in the nation's capital, reports of positive cases recorded in Orere province, Western province, West Sepik province, Southern Highlands province, and the autonomous region of Bougainville this week create more worries for the general public. This happens as the nation's capital experiences the second week of lockdown in the second wave of the global pandemic. The Central Province, which borders the National Capital District by land and sea, has put lockdown measures in place, which include shutting down of schools, setting up checkpoints as opposed to roadblocks, and putting in place traffic officers and those in the provincial response team to be in charge of managing the movement of people and vehicles in and around the province. This is seen as a slightly different approach compared to the first wave of lockdowns, where issues of betel nut trade and PMV fines at roadblocks were major concerns. The province, under the leadership of Governor Robert Agarobe, is also utilizing one of its business arms, the Aniani Corporation, to purchase food from its suppliers who usually sell their produce in Port Moresby's major markets. This is aimed at keeping income flowing for the farmers without disrupting or breaching lockdown measures that are in place. In the first wave of lockdown, Central Province supplied tons of food to NCD for consumption. Other provinces are beefing up efforts to prepare or cater for the surge in the number of confirmed cases and deaths relating to COVID-19 in the country. However, some people have questioned the reliability of the testing results and whether the people identified have actually been infected by the novel coronavirus. Opposition leader Belden Nama has been vocal about government's efforts in PNG's fight against COVID-19. This has been from government spending and legal issues to COVID-19 testing and national security. When a case was reported in Vanimo, West Sepik province this week, Nama questioned the reliability of this.
Simply fake. So I'm really alarmed when they declared first COVID-19 case in Vanimo. I know the CEO of Vanimo General Hospital is not a doctor by profession. He's just an administrator, come CEO for Vanimo General Hospital. And I know the CEO, the controller is a deputy provincial administrator, who is not the CEO, who is not the doctor by profession, whether doctor as in medical doctor. So these are the two people who signed a letter to say that we have COVID-19 first case in Vanimo. And not only that letter, I've checked physically with a patient that they say he's a first COVID-19 patient. That is why I also want to investigate in Port Moresby. Those declared COVID-19 patients who have been held at Rita Flynn courts, are they really COVID-19 patients?
National Pandemic Response Controller and Police Commissioner David Manning, in response to the opposition leader, invited Mr. Nama to visit the Rita Flynn Isolation Facility in NCD to see for himself the COVID-19 patients being monitored there. So far, there have been more than 180 cases and 3 deaths recorded, but a total lockdown seems unconfirmed. Another concern has been the effects on the general public when lockdown measures have been put in place. And in Port Moresby, street vendors do not want another lockdown. However, there are some communities in NCD who are taking initiatives to create awareness and implement preventative measures for COVID-19. This is in response to authorities putting in place lockdown measures. One such community is the PTC or Telecom compound, where youths have been mobilized to monitor movement of vehicles and people at their main gate.
We see that there is a need to stand up as a community and fight this invisible virus, COVID-19.
The youths have been doing that with their own initiative. And I supported them by seeing them on the gate. And also thank you for the initiative.
This security guard has been doing awareness at a busy shopping area at Waigani in the nation's capital.
Mask, hand claps, mask, no go close to give distance. Now you play around there and around you can have kartu, mask must up, give distance, sit down, you go.
And in the midst of all this, a major drug bust on the outskirts of Port Moresby as a result of a plane crash, which is said to be the biggest in the country's history. Concerns of transnational crime between PNG and neighboring Pacific Island countries resurface. Australia is concerned and is determined to tackle these issues as an economic leader in the Pacific region.
And that's probably the key network that we have to cooperate with each other and with other countries across the Pacific and then into Southeast Asia to deal with transnational crime.
But the fight against COVID-19 continues, and assistance from both within PNG and overseas to help PNG's response is welcoming news for the National Pandemic Response Team. Borneo Pacific Pharmaceuticals Limited made a donation to Port Moresby General Hospital last week of over 200,000 kina worth of personal protective equipment after the hospital, which is arguably the biggest for admissions in the country, made an appeal for assistance.
That's why we have put flyers on Facebook for people to help. So much negativity, but it's for a good cause. You are helping PMGH to deliver normal services so that NCDPHA and our partners can continue to take care of normal COVID patients.
On Thursday this week, a maiden humanitarian air service flight funded by the Australian government under a Pacific Islands Forum arrangement arrived at Jackson's International Airport. 3 tons of essential medical supplies were on this flight that came from Nadi, Fiji, to be used in the response against COVID-19 in PNG.
It is the UN World Food Program that is operating these air services that would allow all the Pacific states to be able to access humanitarian supplies and allow for humanitarian and medical personnel to move among the different Pacific islands that have been heavily affected by the restrictions in terms of transport.
As external assistance flows in, the responsibility of utilizing these resources internally, as well as practicing hygiene and social distancing, falls back to authorities, families and individuals in PNG in order to contain the virus. Mask wearing has become mandatory in public places, and so mask making has become a business venture for some. Lockdown measures in light of the National Pandemic Act 2020 have been applied during this second wave of the pandemic. While some consider the measures not as strict as in the first wave of the pandemic, others consider it otherwise. But one thing is for sure, lessons learned from previous lockdown periods earlier in the year are applied in this wave of lockdown. So as Papua New Guinea works to flatten the curve on the graph for number of positive cases, which is to contain the virus, one can only hope that it will be sooner than later.